Hey everyone, we are here today on another episode of LGOtv Big Talk because I hear small talk. There's my friend, Brant Menswar. He's a rock star. So lucky to have him here today.
I'm so excited to be here. I can't even begin to tell you. I've been jealous of everyone you've had on, and it's like it's about friggin' time. The minister of Razzle Dazzle gets his shot.
The
I love
Duke
it.
of Delicious is here. And, I'm coming into this kind of mellow because I don't have any intro music, and I know I need
Yeah.
some.
Well,
Oh, man.
It's up to you. You've
I
got to
know.
decide. Your thing is you come in like I like this, but I like that, and they're like reggae and polka. I'm like they
I
don't go
know.
together. You're gonna have to pick one.
If you could have Joan Jett sing the aria to La Traviata for me as an opening music, like that would be cool. Can you get on that, man? You're a rock
Absolutely.
star, don't you? Don't you have
I,
some?
I'm gonna phone in every favor. Yes.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So you are a rock star. Talk to me a little bit. Like I know you as like Brant Menswar, the adult, like the responsible people put them on stage to talk to their businesses. Brant, you're what, a top 10 motivational speaker. You have been on the stage for every major corporation that exists on the planet. And you come in with your rock star energy and your music and your stories and the razzle dazzle and all of that, and yet there was a part of you before you were like this quote unquote grown up
Mm-hmm.
that we all know and put our, faith in and allow our companies to be influenced by. Who were you as a kid? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New Hampshire, in Manchester, New Hampshire. Um, Adam Sandler is from the same town as
Nice.
me, and so is Seth from Seth Meyers and his brother and the whole family there. And so I grew up a sports guy, right? So I was a four-sport athlete in high school. Um, Baseball was sort of my thing, and I grew up. That was it. I had one goal, and that was to make it to the pros, and everything was going.
Realized you like weren't
Yeah,
funny like the other guys that were from there, so you're like, if I'm not funny, I gotta.
it was more like I have always had this insane competitive piece to me, where I don't just want to win; I want to destroy the other person. in a loving way. I want to win, but I want to win so big that people just give up. You know what I mean?
You
Like
like the you
that's
don't like the asterisk next to the name. Like,
no,
oh
none
yeah,
of
okay,
that.
I
We
feel
don't
you. I
we
feel
don't
you,
want
brother.
that. And so for me, that I was a pitcher, and so it fed that, right. Every time I got on the mound, it was like the best place on the planet for me to be. And then I got hurt. I got hurt my sophomore year of high school, playing soccer of all things, and I separated my shoulder. And the first doctor told me I'd never throw again. I had, fortunately, my dad is a very well-known pitching coach up in New England and has coached several Cy Young Award winners and several World Series folk, and so we called in some favors, and I was able to get in with Dr. Pappas from the Red Sox, and he was able to work with me and rehab for about a year. But it just, I continued to play. Went into college to play, went to Florida Southern College in Lakeland, Florida, to play baseball. And after a year there, my arm it was dead. I had torn every muscle from the center of my chest to the AC joint. And so there wasn't a lot that could happen. And so that's when I had to figure something else out. I didn't have a backup plan. There was no plan B.
So okay, so the soccer was that like a legit game? Were you playing soccer with your friends, or were you like a multi-sport type of
Yeah.
kid?
Yeah, this is going to sound like a total D bag, but no, I was all state
I love it.
in almost every sport I
Okay,
played.
so you
Uh,
didn't get in trouble with your dad when you got hurt. It wasn't like you came limping home one day and you're like, "Hey, dad, like
no,
amazing world renowned pitching coach. I was playing with my friends and I fucked up."
no, no, no.
Okay.
It was a state semifinal soccer match that was about minus 10 degrees out at that time in November in New Hampshire, and I had a breakaway. I was a striker. And so I had one person to beat. He came at me to slide tackle, missed the ball, got my ankles, and I did a flip in the air, but I couldn't get my hands out to break my fall. So I landed between my head and my shoulder and tore everything. And so, that was, that was that.
Yeah,
So,
and so then you go to Florida Southern and you're
mhm,
playing
mhm,
and you are doing the same thing, right? Which is you're putting everything you have into everything you got, every opportunity that
yeah,
comes along because god damn it, you're gonna do this,
that's
right?
right.
So there's a little bit of a theme here, right? A
Yeah.
little theme that there's you don't do anything halfway.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens then when your identity, which is wrapped up in I'm the very best at this thing, which
Yeah.
is any athletic field I step on, suddenly you can't. What happens to you in that moment? I mean, if it were me in college, I would just start drinking
Yeah,
heavily
you
as a kid.
batshit crazy is where you go.
Yeah, yeah.
It was something that for me, I had this massive existential crisis, right?
Yeah.
I literally had nothing else I wanted to do. I didn't have a dream of being an architect or a this or a that or a policeman or a fireman, like all those things that you dream of as a kid. I only had one dream, and it was to play baseball. And so
Right.
for me,
So you lose the baseball, you
mhm,
you lose the I would imagine the social circle of all the team members, right? And you don't have a frontal lobe yet because
right,
you're still what, like 19?
a hormone raging, yes, uh, uh, college
This is
man.
not a pretty picture. Okay, keep
No, it is
going.
not.
I just want to make sure that I
It's
fully understood the horror show
mhm.
happening here.
Yes. I was living on Razzle Dazzle at that point because that's
Mhm.
all I had left. But it was this. I had this thought, at least for me at that time, that it got very spiritual for me. So my thing was God must have a plan that I am unaware of. And so I'm supposed to be a pastor or I'm supposed to be something. And so I sort of traveled down that path for a minute. Was applied to Emory University and was going to go to seminary once I got out of college, but just it didn't end up going. I interned for a summer my senior year uh, with a church in Central Florida and had an absolute horrendous experience. And that chased me out of the church for a good 5 years. And so I had to pivot. And so for me, music came into play because it was being on stage was the closest I could get to feeling like being on the mound. And so that's what happened. I had always sort of tinkered. I took guitar lessons when I was a kid, messed around, but nothing serious. And then when I had all this free time, because I wasn't practicing 6 hours a day anymore at Florida Southern, I joined my first sort of college band called Madhouse Brew, and we would play Zim's Bar in Lakeland, and all of the great '80s hits that we would cover, and I loved it. I didn't expect it to turn into anything, but at the time it was just a way for me to sort of pivot away and not feel awful that I wasn't doing what I thought I was made to do.
Now, were you like a churchy kid growing up? What
No.
did No, so how did you find religion in this moment?
Um, why the fuck else would I get hurt? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, what? This is everything. I mean,
Yeah.
there has to be something more. You have to believe that there is something that we don't understand or that we are never going to understand
Mhm,
to deal with things that just go 100% against everything you believe and want.
hmm.
And so for me, it sort of came in a fury and went out in a fury not very long after that, because if you're gonna become a Christian, right? And for me, that was the thing. And I had gone to church. I was baptized Catholic, but I told you I played sports my whole life, so Sundays got in the way of practice, right? And
Mm,
so
mhm, mhm.
if it was church or practice, it was practice. And so that's just the way it was. Didn't grow up in an overly religious family. It wasn't that they were against it. We just were a sports family, and so whatever the season was the sport we were playing. And when I came to this moment, there was a great sort of head of the Christian studies program at Florida Southern, the chaplain there, and he was phenomenal. And when I had this like I can't play ball anymore and was broken, he was there to help me through. And so that was sort of that introduction into what is all this stuff about, because I never had taken any time to really figure it out myself.
So what I think is so interesting about this is that the mound to the pulpit to the stage, right? I mean, I think that there's this. I would say that some of the best musicians are preachers, right? They
Mhm.
are leaders, they are gurus, or whatever the thing is that you want. And so it is sort of this interesting thing where you kept trying to replicate the mound in different places.
It's without question, right? So that for me was, you know, the idea of having that influence, the idea of the impact that I could have at the pulpit was very attractive to me.
Hmm.
For right idea, wrong vehicle. But it took me a long time to figure that out, right? So I have 5 years, I didn't step foot in a church. I was so pissed off. There was no way I was going to, and my first 5 years of being married, my wife went to church every Sunday, and I'm like, have fun. I'm not going. And then, you know, we end up sort of turning around. Her brother started writing music, asked me for help. He was writing, he was starting a Christian band. And so I got back into writing music again and writing songs. And that was sort of my first step, you know, little toe in the water back into religion. And before you know it, I am recording my first album, which was in the Christian market, and then sign a Christian record deal and tour every, you know, major church in the world from here to Australia and back. And whether it's Osteen's church or it's Rick Warren or it's Willow Creek or it's, you know, all of these incredible churches, had a chance to see it done really well and really shittily, if that's a word.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I sort of came out of that when we left our record deal and thought I had this idea of what church should be. And so we started, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. So we started a church in my living room with 5 families. And after a year, we were at about 400. And so next thing you know, I'm pastoring a church with a couple of friends who I brought in to co-pastor as well. And I did that for 6 years until the shit hit the fan.
Wow, that is, I actually didn't know that part of your story where you founded your own. It's so interesting. I mean, I founded a Montessori school because I had that same thing, but man, it was definitely not the same thing. So, yeah, okay. So the shit hit the fan, right? You've heard of the shit hit
Mhm.
the fan, and that's your son getting sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my oldest son, Theo, when he was 14, he was a soccer player. And in spite of soccer being the bane of my existence, we still let him play. I was not going to be that dad. And so we happened to catch him, as you know, as a mom of teenage sons, you know that I saw a miracle, which was he actually decided to take a shower after he played, which is, you know, doesn't happen often. These
What is the shower
Yes,
thing you're referring to? We don't know what
the
that is in my house.
it's a 14-year-old's right to just stank all the time. And so he was walking from the bathroom was across from his across the hall from his bedroom. And I happened to be walking down the hall and he ran out over in a towel into his room. And I'm like, I saw these bruises all over him and I didn't quite know. I'm like, they didn't match playing soccer.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, come here for a second. And he had him on like the undersides of his elbows and really weird places. And so we made an appointment with his doctor and went on our business. And the next Saturday, we are getting ready to go to a soccer match again. And the phone rings and it's his pediatrician. And she said, stop what you're doing, pack a bag. There's a doctor waiting for you in the emergency room at Florida Hospital for Children. And so we're like, what do you mean?
You're
And
like, I thought you were just going to tell me he's anemic.
yeah. And she's like, no, you need to go right now. They're waiting for you. And so we got there and they did some tests and, you know, his platelet count was at about 6,000, which is post chemo numbers. And so it took 6 months to figure out what the hell was going on. But we found out he had cancer. He had this rare blood cancer called myelodysplastic syndrome, which actually Robin Roberts also had.
Yeah.
You usually see it in people who are older, and it's usually caused by someone who has had cancer previously, and the treatment, the chemo, causes myelodysplastic syndrome. So it's really rare to get it in a kid just sort of out of nowhere. And we had to go to Boston Children's to get it diagnosed, and we finally did and came back. And when we figured it out, he needed a bone marrow transplant. And so they told us, look, here's the journey. It's going to be about 100 days, right? He's going to spend 30 days in the hospital once we find a match. He's going to sort of come in and out for the next few months to make sure everything is okay. And, by the 100th day, he's back playing soccer and we're good to go. And so we started on that journey, and fortunately, we found a match. His brother wasn't a match. I think a lot of times we think that that's going to be the case, but siblings are only like a 30% chance of actually matching. So his brother wasn't. So we found a 6-year-old male in Atlanta that donated his marrow, and it was a perfect match. And so August 12th, of 2012, we had his transplant. And the transplant went well, but he ended up developing something called graft versus host disease, which is where the marrow that's inserted in the body doesn't recognize the environment of which it's been placed, so it begins to attack everything. So the way that you treat that is you super suppress the immune system, and so that's what they did. And when they super suppressed his immune system, he ended up catching a deadly fungus while he was in the hospital. The fungus treatment was to super boost the immune system. So we had 2 treatments that created a zero-sum game, and both things were killing him. And we got called into the parents' lounge after about day 200. There was a group of doctors in the room, and my wife and I walked in, they sat us down and they said, "We are so sorry, but there's nothing else we can do. And we don't think he's going to make it through the night. So you should probably call who you need to call." And so, what do? We were shocked. I grabbed her hand. We walked back to the room. We got his younger brother, who's 4 years younger than him. And, we sat on the edge of the bed and we tried to find the words to say goodbye. And as you can imagine, it was the worst. You don't recover. It's something that changes you forever. And, hearing your child say, "I'm going to miss you, Daddy," is something that shatters everything in you. And so, I called my brother, and he's in New Hampshire still, and we were in Orlando, and I'm like, "You're not going to have time to make it, man. You're going to need to say your goodbyes over the phone. I'm sorry." And so he does. And after he's done, he's so distraught that he can't make it down. You're going to make me cry, girl. I swear to God.
I've heard you tell this
I'm
story
sorry.
a million times, and I'm crying. I know it ends,
Yeah.
and I'm crying right now.
People are going to see this going, "What the fuck is going on LGOtv today?"
They're going to be like, "Wow,
Oh my
Laura doesn't
God.
have a cold black heart."
No.
So he says goodbye over the phone.
He does. And then he ends up,
But before you tell, because
yeah,
I know where the story's going.
yeah.
Where are you right now in this moment with your faith then? Because clearly you must be pretty fucking angry
Yeah,
with God that you have, you've like created a church, you've done all these things,
Yeah.
you've found faith.
Yeah.
How could there possibly be a reason for this?
So, God and I are in a flat out bloody fist fight. And it was weird because, fortunately at that time, the church is surrounding us with people who are just there to serve and pray and love on you and do all those things. So while I am incredibly grateful and thankful that that's happening, at the same time, I'm like, "Fuck you. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to my kid?"
Right.
And it's rocking the very foundation of everything I believe. And when you're in a crisis, it's not the best time to be deciding things as to what you believe or don't believe. But at that moment, you're swept up in the emotion, right? You're swept up in everything that's about to happen. And so, we are sitting here going, there's nothing else for us to do. So I'm literally sitting on the edge of the bed all night. My brother, after he says his goodbyes, is distraught and ends up sitting on his couch and decides he's going to film himself holding up these poster boards, sort of explaining what's happening. "My nephew's dying. This is what he has. This is what he's taking. Here are the drugs. If you know anything, if you have any ideas," it's a Hail Mary, right? It's just, "Please help us. We have less than 24 hours before he dies." And he uploads it to YouTube. I spend all night sitting on the edge of the bed waiting for Theo to pass. My phone is ringing off the hook the next morning. I'm trying to stay present. One of the things that I try to talk about all the time is how important it is for us to stay in the present, and how we want to be pulled to the future. We want that uncertainty that lives there, destroys us in a really bad way if we're not careful. And so I'm just trying to stay present and enjoy every last second that I possibly can. And at that point, he's basically mummified, right? He can't hardly talk. Graft versus host disease creates it mummifies your body, so you can't really move your lips, you can't move your eyes that much. And my phone at that point is hot because it's been ringing all morning, and I'm thinking it's church friends, it's people, we're praying for you, if there's anything we can do, whatever. By the time I reach down and grab my phone and look at it, I got all these numbers, all these emails, all these texts from people that I don't know, and voicemails. And one of them happens to be a doctor from MD Anderson in Houston. And he says, listen, somehow I saw this video and I think I might be able to help. He's one of the leading researchers in this fungus that's killing Theo. And he said, there's an alternate treatment that I don't know that you're aware of. Could I speak to your doctor? And so we were like, yeah, absolutely. So he does that. And then I get a call from Dr. Tim Johnson from Good Morning America. And he says, listen, you tell your doctor anybody he wants to speak to, I'll make it happen in the next 24 hours. Just get me a list. So we made a list of a doctor at Dana-Farber in Boston, who's a cancer specialist, leading sort of researcher on graft versus host disease, and another doctor at Cornell University doing some cutting edge research. And the 4 doctors put their heads together to come up with this batshit crazy plan to try to save Theo's life. And it worked. And so, here we are saying our goodbyes, and 24 hours later have that video my brother uploaded was seen over 500,000 times. And people just believed that there was an answer, and went to the deepest part of purpose and found the impossible. And he just turned, he turned 22. He's in class for the first time since the 8th grade. So,
oh my God.
Right.
That is incredible. It is. I mean, I've heard the story, and I still, every time it's like watching The Last Dance. Like, I know how it ends for Michael Jordan, and still I was like, will they win? Will they win? Will they win? Like, I know how it ends, and it is an incredible. Did you know that your brother made the video when he made it, or you didn't know till the next day?
I didn't know until I picked up my phone, because I'm like, I don't know why I don't recognize any of these numbers or any of these people. And it was just crazy. Yeah.
So the part of the story that you didn't tell that I want to talk about, because you talk about it so eloquently in your new book, Black Sheep, which we're gonna talk about, is living with the weight of knowing that your son knew that you said goodbye, that you gave up.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? It's like they say there's, like, you can't put toothpaste back in the tube. There are things you can't
Yeah.
unsay, but that had to weigh on you like a billion bricks.
Yeah. The hardest part for me, in spite of the miracle of saving his life, it came down to me going to bed every single night and worrying that Theo thought I gave up on him. And I beat myself up over it for years. And I know that's not it. I can be logical and think through, but the truth is, as a dad and as somebody who is passionate about impact, I hated myself for allowing somebody else to tell me what was possible. I didn't have anything defined in my life, my non-negotiables, so that I could frame this conversation in a way that honored everything that mattered most to me. And so instead, I just went, okay. And I went and I said goodbye. And it was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I actually sat down to figure out what the hell mattered most to me. And when I figured it out, I started to use those things to frame decisions and change my life. And here we are, 8 years later. And that incident has led to this book has led to me speaking on stage, has led to some incredible things, but it was born out of the worst possible decision that I have ever made. And so all I want now is for people to figure their shit out so they never end up like I was, and beating themselves up unnecessarily for years over a decision that wasn't necessary.
So I want to get to that in a second, but before I do, I want to ask you, how did the conversation go? Because I'm sure you had the conversation with Theo, which is like, this is this thing that's weighing on me. I
Yeah,
mean, how do I'm sure he was like, no problem, Dad, I get it, right? Like
yeah,
I was like nine toes out the door. But
yeah.
how did that conversation go? And how many times did you have that conversation? And how did that conversation go?
Once,
Yeah.
and you don't want to be uh, anything less than Superman for your kids.
Yeah.
So I could only do it once, and I apologized and just said I should have known better, and told them that I've dedicated the rest of my life to correcting that fuck up. Yeah.
And so the book Black Sheep is a pretty good way to do that.
I hope.
I read it. You sent me an early copy. I read it, and my email to you was, "This book will change lives."
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that is my retribution, I guess. It is something that I believe with my whole heart. I have lived it for the last 18 months, almost 2 years. My life is transformed. I'm in a way different place. It has brought amazing people into my life like you, who has been nothing but grace for me, and I will never be able to thank you enough or repay you from what you have sown into my life over the last year. And it's because of people like you that I believe that this book has legs, and has the ability to really help people who are struggling, who believe there's something more for them out there, but they're not quite sure how to get it.
Yeah, I think this book has more than legs. I think it's got legs and arms. Do cheetahs have arms? Maybe they just have 4 legs, but it doesn't just have 2 legs. It's gonna, like, run across the Sahara faster than anything you can imagine. This book is incredible, and I was so honored to read it, and I think it extends the pattern, right? Because it is another way to take people to church. As you know, I'm not a super religious person, and yet I do believe that each one of us has a church. Like for me, we talk about the Church of the Charles River when I go
Mhm.
rowing early in the morning and it's
You bet.
sunrise and it's gorgeous and you are rowing on glass in unison with 7 other rowers, and it is everyone. We have a team t-shirt on the back of the t-shirt that says, "For you I will." So when you are so tired and you're so exhausted and you're approaching the finish line and you're trying to get that one last bit of gas to beat the other team, because we got to beat the other teams,
That's right.
you look up at the rower in front of you and it says, "For you I will." And for me, that's church. And
Yeah.
I think the idea of finding your flock is a way for each one of us to find our own personal church. So so Black Sheep is sort of a funny title.
Mhm.
So tell us about the Black Sheep.
I was 47 years old when I found out why farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock. I have felt like a black sheep for a lot of my life, um, maybe for different reasons. I think part of what I have figured out over the last couple of years of doing research for this book, is that people feel like black sheep for very different reasons, and it's not always what you think it is. It's not that I went against the grain and I separated myself, and I was the goth kid in high school, or I'm the only person to move away from my family, or I was the only person to go to college, or there's so many different things. But there is this other group of people as well who have excelled so much at what they do that they have sort of outpaced everyone and separated themselves from the flock. So they've become a black sheep because of their success. And as I started to sort of think through what that was, when I did the research to find out, I found out that the reason that farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock is the black sheep's wool can't be dyed. So every black sheep is in fact 100% authentically original. And then I'm like, well, isn't that not the hell what we're trying to do? Is that not the goal of life, to be 100% authentically original, who you are, who you were created to be? And so it started me down this path. of discovering what I call your black sheep values. I believe we all have a flock of 5 black sheep values that are these things that matter most. There are non-negotiables. No matter how much someone wants to influence you or try to change your opinion, you simply will not be moved from these things that are the pillars of your life. And so that was sort of the idea of the book. And it teaches you how to discover your flock, how to prove that they're yours, because what I find most of the time is that when you get to your initial flock of 5, 2 or 3 of them are bullshit. They're who we want to be, but they're not who we are. And so we project this out, or we are caring for other people's sheep. You've got someone in your life and you're forced to care for this and that. And so when you're caring for other people's sheep, it limits the food that you can give to your own. And when you don't feed your sheep, they disrupt your life. And so this idea of proving that they're yours, once you have and proven that these are in fact your non-negotiables, then you can speak them into existence. You choose when and where these black sheep appear in your life on a daily basis, and every day they get fed. And as long as you do that, you live a life of fulfillment.
So this is really about living with intentionality, right? We all have this idea that, I talk a lot, in my course about how, we say we want to do certain things, and then you look at your calendar and you look at your to-do list and you look at your email that you're, trying to get to inbox 0, and you look at the phone calls you're making and the people you're surrounding yourselves with, and the accounts you're following on social media. And what we say we want isn't necessarily how we live our lives. And I think you're right. Like we talk about look good goals. Like these are the goals that look good on my, story of my vision board,
Yep.
but I don't actually really care about those things, but I put them there either because I think they look good to other people and they're socially acceptable, or somebody else has told me they'll love me if
That's right.
I have these things. And so in order to, how do we go about finding our flock of 5, as you call them?
Yeah. So, the other thing I'll say with regards to your book is your book, which is right. Wait, it's there. Right there.
There it is in the
Right
background.
there, baby. Right there.
Teacher's pet. Suck up. I love it. I'll take it every day of the week.
That's hell yes. And so that
How do you
book,
get on the show? You put my book in the background.
that's it.
Easy.
That book taught me a new word, and that word is consonance. And I was not familiar with that word before I read the book. But what that did for me as I'm even writing my book was this idea of alignment, right, between who we are and what we do. And Start With Why by Simon Sinek comes out several years ago. It's this huge hit. And the problem is it's bullshit. You can't start with why.
Right.
You can't. The why is born from the what. You have to define these things that matter most. And it's so for me, my flock of 5, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity. I have 6. I'm a rock star. Get over it.
You're so extra. Oh my God. If this is Bill and Ted's right now, they'd be like,
for me, my purpose was born out of those things, right? So my purpose is to creatively impact people's lives by authentically providing hope. If it sounds familiar, it's because you just heard 4 of my 6 black sheep values in my purpose. There's alignment between those 2 things. When there's alignment, it gives me the ability to adapt and be resilient and choose the how I'm going to honor them. And that's the big difference, right? Because the what and the why rarely change, but the how changes all the time, every day. And so if you want to be more adaptable, more resilient to the things, especially that are happening right now, you have to define these things and make sure they're in alignment with your purpose. So how do you find them? There's several ways, right? And so the way that I encourage in the book is to start with, we have an online assessment that we created at findyourblacksheep.com. And it's designed to give you about 125 commonly held core values. And you're going to sort of first select all the words that are important to you. I want a knee-jerk reaction. You read the word, you go, accountability. Ooh, I like that word. Yes. And so upon first pass, what we find is that most people select at least 30 words. And when they select 30 words that are important to them, my first question is, tell me what crippling anxiety and depression feels like. Because you have just created this horrible scenario where you're going to try to honor 30 different things in your life, and you're going to fail. It's an impossible task, but we try. We don't succeed. and then we feel ashamed, then we feel like we're not good enough. We start to get depressed, and so it feeds this incredibly horrible cycle. And so we take that 30 and we bucket them into likeness sort of themes, right? So things like sympathy and empathy would be in the same bucket. And then those 5 buckets, you get to choose the one word that you can't live without. What is the non-negotiable? And so you get to your initial flock of 5, and then you have to prove that they're real. You have to find evidence in your life every day that they organically appear. If they don't, I'm going to challenge that is maybe not one of your black sheep values, because these sorts of things are the very fabric of who you are, and they will show up whether you like it or not. And so that is sort of the initial way. We also do some really fun things in the book as well. And I do this while I am speaking in my talks, but there's a reason we have favorites, right? So we all have a favorite movie, favorite song, favorite food, favorite smell, favorite whatever. And the reason we have favorites is because favorites connect our head and our heart. And when our head and our heart connect, it engages our limbic brain, which is where all of our emotional long-term memory is stored. It's why you can remember lyrics to Purple Rain written 30 years ago, and why you can't remember Justin Bieber lyrics from today, right? Because that can be awful. Mic drop. But the idea is, take a look at your favorites. So for me, it started off with movies. What's my favorite movies? And so when I started to look at my favorite movies, we were able to really get an idea of what mattered most to me. So give me one of your top 3 favorite movies of all time.
Oh boy. I mean, if I'm sitting on a plane and The Devil Wears Prada comes on, I will watch it every time.
So tell me,
I know that doesn't make me sound, I should be saying it's like
I love
some,
that.
epic
Oh,
movie
trust
about
me.
war or something, or like Schindler's
Listen,
List or something. But it's The
mine's
Devil Wears Prada.
Happy Gilmore. So you're 2
Hometown
steps above
boy.
mine, right?
Adam
That's right.
Sandler. At least you have a reason.
So give me a 30-second summary of what Devil Wears Prada is about.
So, it's very funny because because I did the Find Your Black Sheep this
Mhm.
morning, I'm looking at my flock of 5 and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I see where this is going." So what I love about it is the main character, Andy, is so she wants to be a writer. She moves to New York City. She gets this job that she gets massively abused and thinks she's better than everybody else. And then she learns about herself throughout it, that there's actually more inside of her. There are more layers that she has, and she goes through the hard yards and the uncomfortable times, and she grows and she changes, but in the end she stays true to herself.
Mhm. And when we look at Laura's flock of 5 that she went online and did, we see words like determination and integrity and personal growth and impact and optimism and all of these things that were so prevalent in that movie. You would choke
Amazing.
on them if you went back and did that, right?
Right.
And so the idea is, we start to look at our favorites to prove that there's something there, right? So even music, right? Your favorite songs, there's a reason that they're your favorite songs. Your favorite smell. For me, my favorite smell is lilacs. Why is that? Because when I was a kid, every time we would go to my grandmother's house, we'd pull up into her driveway, and she had this gargantuan lilac bush on the side of the house. And every time I'd open the car door to go see her, the first thing I smelled was lilacs, right? And she would take me and pull the flowers off and let me suck the little nectar thing out and do
Yep.
the whole bit, right? And I'm just like, so family being one of my black sheep values, is something that every time I smell lilacs, it reminds me of my grandmother. And so that is these deeply held connections that we have that really help prove that what we say is the most important things in our life actually are.
So I feel badly though, because like family's not one of mine. Although I love my family, but family's
Mhm.
not one of mine. And so, I actually went through and I know you said everyone picks about 30 for the first one. I think I picked 65.
You did. I wasn't going to say that, but yes,
I mean, optimism, right?
yeah, that's
Oh
it.
my god. So
Yes.
I am endlessly turned on by the audacity of the big idea. Like I love that whole thing. I've never met a revolution I didn't like, but I love my family to
Mhm.
pieces. I am deeply private. I will I will go all mama bear on your ass. And I consider family to be family, and also my dear close friends like you and
Yep.
some of the folks that we have in common. Um but then I look at my flock of 5 and I'm like, "Well, but I optimism, impact, determination, integrity, personal growth, I'm not talking about anyone else there. Maybe am I not a good person?"
No, no. So ultimately what I would say is that you more than likely have a sixth like me. It's not uncommon for someone to have six. Anything over six makes it really difficult to honor on a regular basis. But my guess is you have a sixth, and my guess is your sixth is not family, it's connection. Just from knowing you over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, I witness your how important connection is to you, not just for your family, but for your friends and for your community and for your students and for your, all of these sorts of things. And so, for me, the reason that it's family and not connection, because when we do this work, when I'm coaching people through these values exercises, we have something called leveling up. Right. And so, someone, if they told me that faith and community and family were three of their black sheep values, I would tell them that none of those are your black sheep values. It's actually connection. And
Mm,
connection is the value. You're connecting to your God, you're connecting to your family, you're connecting to your community. And so it's connection that's the actual value. You're giving me how you're honoring it. Right. And so that is sort of how it works. And in this case, for me, it's because of the situation that happened with Theo that forced me so much into family that I could make an argument that I could probably level that up to connection. But when we're still in the throes of it, for me here, it still is my priority, right? And making sure that I can provide for them and the treatment and the whole bit and all that sort of stuff, because he's not survivorship is not thriving, it's surviving. And so you have to get to a point where you can sort of flip that a little bit and believe that there is a future for you. And he's still in the middle of that. So it's great. We're thrilled he's making huge progress. But he is had a kidney transplant about a year and a half ago. So he is, his immune system isn't exactly perfect yet. And so, COVID and all these other sorts of things make us crazy, worried that something
yes.
might happen. And so we are super careful, but those are the sorts of things, again, that, it just, these are things that shouldn't move unless you've had some sort of catastrophic event happen in your life, right? Because these are our black sheep values are formed over the course of our lives, right? They are something that happened when you were kids, into teens, into those formative years. And what we often find is when we look at the data, when people do this assessment, is that people are afraid of who they might be. And I think that sucks. And they put out this thing that they believe they should answer, or how they should be, or what they think they have been told they should be or want. Um, and they spend so much effort feeding someone else's sheep that their own is emaciated. And so the goal for us is to identify the truth. And I'm going through, this book launch team. I had this idea. Hey, I'm going to walk 20 people through this 5-week process. And instead of just saying, here's a great book, I wanted to talk about how their lives have transformed from doing the work. Before I could hit stop, when I put out the little blast that said, if you're interested, I had 40 people. So now I'm group coaching 40 people through this process, which has been amazing. But they're finding that the work is hard, that they're really struggling to find proof of the things that they would claim to you. This is who I am. It's not. And it's challenging.
It's really interesting because I look at mine, optimism, impact, determination, integrity, personal growth, and, it's possible that determination could, like, or personal growth, they can kinda, like, go together. I can see that
Correct.
now. But,
Yep.
like, I have things in my list of 65 that,
Yep.
democracy and service and
Mhm.
community and all of these things that are so in my core of who I am, and frankly, I think a lot of that is just integrity, right? For me, that's how do I show up in the world? I show
That's
up
right.
with integrity. And how does that manifest itself? It manifests itself by raising money for and chairing campaigns of of individuals that I think give more inclusion and more representation in office. And so some of the things that are on that list. And so it really, I really struggled with how do I pick just the five, and that idea of, well, okay, how do these things then manifest themselves? So optimism, for me, optimism manifests itself in that I will, every time I start anything for work, I just throw it out there and I hope it's going to work, and I just
Yeah.
think it's going to get, and we'll just see what happens, right? But I do it because I care about whether or not I'm actually making impact in people's lives. And so I just sort of went through all of
Mhm.
them and thought about, well, if I do look at my calendar and I do look at my email and I do look at the people I surround myself with, can I point to these and say, yes, these are there? But
Yeah.
I'm interested in this idea that they don't change, because I think, I guess maybe it's like different ages and different phases. So it's I think maybe there's like a few that are sort of could be grouped together, and maybe it's just your decision of how you want to express it during that time, but they really are who you are. And so if they are formed by experiences you have growing up. I mean, I think a lot
Mhm.
of us have had, a lot of us have pain and rejection
Yeah.
and disappointment, and maybe it was like bad parenting, or maybe it was rejection in high school, or maybe it was getting
Sure.
fired or being abused by a partner, or something in your life. Some of these black sheep values probably come out of that. So maybe somebody's black sheep value is security. Is it okay if your black sheep values come from, I just never want to be like that again, or should they be more
Uh,
forward thinking?
no, I think you'll find that there is a huge amount of your values that are formed out of struggle, right? And so that's it, it's not. I have yet to meet somebody who has lived the rose colored glasses life their whole life, right? So they've experienced some part of struggle, and a lot of times it's not that somebody loved me so much or did this so much that had such an incredible impact. It's that they did just the opposite, and it made me feel so awful that I never want to be like that. And it shaped the things that how I express myself and how I behave, and the words that I choose and all those sorts of things. And it's interesting. As I said, the hard work is when you get in to try to prove. And so that we do 2 weeks worth of tracking. So you get to your initial flock, and then I'm going to tell you, here's a workbook. And every night before you go to bed, you need to do some archaeology and dig through your day and find proof. I know that service is probably one of yours just from working with you for years. It is something that, out of the ones that you gave me, there are 2 or 3 that I feel really strongly about with you, that I think they're correct, but there are 2 or 3 that experience this either leveling up to a larger word. And this is the really hard part, and also the interesting part. When you start to track, you have to really define what these words mean to you,
Yes.
because integrity for you, um, is expressed in the how, right? So I break everything down into three places with this work. It's the what, why, and the how. The what are the values, the why is your purpose, and the how is your mission. And so the idea is, for you, you've defined that what, but because of how you've expanded that definition, your how looks very different than anyone else. And that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you that black sheep, right? Is the idea that your interpretation of this is really what is helping you become that authentic original that we want you to be.
Yeah, it's so interesting because as I was going through, you have three words in particular that I think I think are really a great example of defining these words differently. You have money, prosperity, and wealth, right?
Mhm.
So those are three words which we could all say mean that you have plenty of dough and you can, make decisions and you have a lot of freedom and flexibility. But for me, I look at money and it feels like, okay, well, that's just a thing. I look
Sure.
at wealth and that feels to me like it's multiple generations of
Mhm.
security. I look at prosperity and I feel like that has more like kindness and charity and other
Mhm.
things to it. And so as I was going through, I like clicked money because it was the first one that came. I'm like, well, that money's important to me, right? I'm
Sure.
Linda Evangelista. I'm not getting out of bed for less than $25,000 a day. But But then I got to prosperity. I was like, oh no, prosperity's good. And then I got to wealth, and I was like, no. Okay, then I unclicked money, and I unclicked prosperity, and I was like, going through, and I was trying to figure out, because I was in my head trying to define these words in
Mhm,
my own unique way. And
mhm.
so the process, that's the hard work, right? That's why people hire you. That's why they bring you in, because
That's right.
the hard work of digging through your day and saying, well, did you really do this? And if you didn't do it, what did you do instead?
Right.
That's when we're like, oh, actually, what really matters to me is success. And it's not actually accomplishment. Accomplishment is I get something done. Success is everybody knows about it, right? It's like
That's right.
so I think that that's a really interesting question. And when somebody gets to that point and they're like, oh, so it turns out I'm not the person I thought. How do I get comfortable with what are actually my black sheep?
That's it, right? So you just hit the nail on the head as to the scary part of this work is when you discover who you really are you going to accept yourself? And the biggest part of my work is teaching people that they're enough, that they don't need to be any more than they already are. But the problem is you don't know what you are. And so you've got to figure this out, because I promised you, when you hit it and it's real and they are the authentic black sheep values. I had someone the other day that's going through, actually a friend of ours who I won't mention by name because I gave her a loving kick in the ass last night, of epic proportions.
Oh,
But
I'm all about that.
I know you are. She said, I picked one of these values and it really is. I haven't been doing the work because one of the values is really annoying me. And I'm like, if it's a value, it's not going to annoy you. So part of what you just gave as an example, as something like wealth or, money or any of those things. So I purposefully included words in that first group of 125 that were traps, right? Because it's not, especially if they're an outcome based word, because one
Mhm.
of the first things you learn is, unless your name is Glinda or Gandalf or whatever, you don't have that. You don't control outcomes, right? You can't control an outcome. You can only control the deliberate intention that goes into making a decision. Best case scenario, right? So the book talks about how do you do that? Well, those are born from these black sheep values. Our decisions are, they consider every fact we can get our hands on, and then we honor what we're feeling in the moment so that we can stay committed to the decision that we make. But when we start to look through these things, if you said it's money or you said it's wealth, my first question is why?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, well, I just want to be able to give, I want to take care. Okay, so why isn't it generosity? Why isn't it something like that? And that's the line of thought that we have to help people through. We coach them to go, okay, you're giving me a means to an end, right? So why do you care so much? And that's where really the deep dives are, and that's where you discover that sometimes these black sheep values are born out of very painful experiences, and it's what makes us go, I don't want to do this work. Um, I I could comfortably say that I would say 99% of the people on the planet are winging it. Um, and I know that is a ridiculously exaggerated number, but I have met very few people that I can ask, give me in one sentence what your life's purpose is. Tell me what your non-negotiables are. They give me yeah, well, it's kind of, no, it is, period. End of conversation.
Mhm.
And when you know them and you own them and you speak them into existence, your life transforms. When I first started doing this, um, I can have all the swagger and razzle dazzle I want, but unless people are hiring you and paying you what you want, who gives a shit? And
Yeah.
so for me, it was
Well, your bank doesn't take Razzle Dazzle in exchange
that's
for a
right. I
mortgage.
was like,
Mine does. I don't know who you're banking with.
Freedom Mortgage. I've got two ounces of razzle dazzle for you this month. But for me, when I first discovered that the power of not just discovering what these are, but actually choosing when and where they appear, right?
Mm.
That was in January of 2019. And I started to, every interaction, I'd look at my calendar, I would write what black sheep values I wanted to appear during my appointments. So there was nothing left to chance or luck. It was, I am choosing to speak this value into existence at that time. 6 months in, Washington Speakers Bureau names me one of the top 10 motivational speakers in the country, with Amy Cuddy and Jack Nicklaus and Magic Johnson. And I'm going, how the hell did I end up on that list? They don't even represent me. I'm like, I don't understand. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Holy shit, this stuff actually works. And so I started to really continue and double down, and my speaking engagements tripled, my fee tripled. And all of a sudden I'm earning what I'm worth, and I'm changing what's possible, not just for me, but for everybody in my ecosphere, that I can help raise their game, and provide opportunities, which is really what I want to do. But that came from making sure that I was honoring the things that mattered most to me. I was leading with them. And this is the sort of end of the story that really brings it full circle. While farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock, they certainly value them, but in a different way. So farmers keep one black sheep for every 100 white sheep that they care for, as a marker. So every morning a sheep farmer gets up, he looks out over the flock. If he's got 500 sheep in his care, he should see 5 black sheep. If he doesn't see 5 black sheep, he knows something's wrong. It's famine, it's disease, it's wolves, it's something. It's their ability to be unique and stand out from the crowd that gives them the first look. If he tried to search for the 495 that look exactly the same, how many could he lose before he knows what's happening? So this idea of using the black sheep to really get there quickly, is that idea of getting someone's first look. And I don't know about you, I want everybody's first look, whether you're a friend, a family, a spouse, a partner. I want your first look. I want to be the person you come to when you need something. And so for me, that only happens by leading with those black sheep vows. It's why I have it tattooed on my arm, is to remind myself, if I'm not leading with those things that matter most to me, how are they going to see who I really am? And so the more that I do that, the more it helps frame how people treat me, the words they use to talk to me. All of those things start to transform my life. And all of a sudden I'm living this life of fulfillment that a life of consonance, as you would say, that I would never have experienced if I didn't do this work and define these things.
And the beauty of this is that even though there's 125 words and some of them are traps, so let's say there's 100, right,
Sure.
that are real. Maybe there's 115.
Yeah.
Each of us have individual words that are shorthand for the others, right? So, you said that one of mine should be service, but for me, I see impact. Like, service doesn't mean anything unless it's impact at the end of the day. Like, that's the thing I care about more than anything on earth. Like,
You
put
bet.
up a black square, put up a black and white selfie. That's service, but that's not impact. Like, let's
That's
talk
right.
about impact. And service for service is just performative. I want impact. And so if I were to look at my calendar and I went through and I was like, okay, I'm going to speak impact into the conversation that I'm having, at 12 o'clock with a client.
Yep.
I know that in there, I'm saying I need to be generous. I need to be of
Mm-hmm.
service. I need to be listening. Like, there are other things that become that impact for me. And it allows me not just to live my best life, but I think it also allows me to look at my calendar and say, okay, that one, I had no black sheep to put next to it. What am
Mm-hmm.
maybe I shouldn't be, maybe I'm wasting my time there. Maybe that's actually taking away from the energy that I want to speak into the other parts of my life. So it's a really good way to slay some of those calendar dragons also and figure out where we actually do our best work.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important to talk about too, just briefly, is this idea that when we think about feeding the sheep, we think about output, but you also need to think about input. What are you taking in to feed these things? Right. And so oftentimes, especially right now during sort of quarantine and pandemic, it's like, well, I don't have a lot of interaction with people, and I'm by myself or I'm alone, so my sheep don't get fed. And it's like, no, that's bullshit. Now you have to look at input. How are you taking things in that are still going to honor those things? It doesn't have to come out of you, but it most certainly should come into you, so that you can absolutely still make sure that they eat. And that's the thing. I tell people all the time, if you have 4 kids and you only decided to feed 2, how's that going to go? Right? The 2 that don't get fed are going to squawk and scream and yell and tug at you and demand that they get fed. So the thing that I found out this weekend that pissed me off, because I am so pissed that I did not know this before I finished the book, because it should be in the book and it's driving me crazy, is that one of the group of my 40 came to me Marlena, who's this incredible photographer, and she said, "Hey, listen, I don't know if you know this, but did you know that sheep recognize the voice of their shepherd?" And I'm like, "Don't freaking tell me that, because it's going to piss me off."
Oh, man.
And so I did some research, and what I found out is this: sheep recognize the voice of the person who feeds them, but sheep have very short-term memories. So if you are feeding your black sheep on a daily basis, they will recognize you and be there at your beck and call when you need them to perform, right? That's incredibly powerful to think.
Yes. Yes.
But the flip side, if you are feeding someone else's sheep, they are also going to be showing up. So the ones that you feed recognize your voice. So if you're feeding all the wrong things, you've got to get to these non-negotiables and feed them first.
Yes.
That's what has to happen.
Yes. Yes. So that's how you live your life with intentionality, and you don't just wing it. I love it. And, look, you can write another book about that, or you could just use that as part of I mean, there's a ton of stuff that didn't make it into Limitless because,
Yes,
I was kind of winging it, and I use it on stage now, and it's actually great because people feel like they're getting more. So
that's
there you
right.
go.
That's right.
Brant, how do people find you?
So the best way on social media is just at Brant Menswar, BrantMenswar. Don't put an E in there. Everybody wants to make me menswear. I am not an owner of the menswear department. I wouldn't need anything. I'd be wealthy if that was the case, right? So just at Brant Menswar. For the book, findyourblacksheep.com. You can see it on the screen right there. You can get to everything else that you need to for that.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes for people that are just listening along. My friend, you are amazing. Your book is amazing. It is going to change the world. And I'm so thrilled that you decided to come join me on the show that you were frankly responsible for helping me with the video and the sound and the technology and all of that. So I appreciate you. I love you. And thank you for being here today.
Wow. I love you with my whole heart, and just, you are incredible, and anything I can do to repay all of the kindness you've shown me over the last year, I'm your man.
You're awesome.
You got it.